Welcome to Play Pause Turn. In this podcast, we discuss all things to do with TV, films, games and literature. We give our thoughts on the media we've been enjoying, old or new, and comment on anything topical. Hi, I'm Jon, and again, I'm joined by Alex. Hello, Alex. How are you?
Hello, Jon. Yes, I'm well, thank you. I am enjoying the British summer.
Yeah, we talk about weather a lot on this podcast because whenever we're recording, we can look out of our windows. At the moment, it's grim again. What is it now? It's August now. We're recording this in August.
That's right.
I'm planning to go abroad this week to try and escape the British weather. Meanwhile, I have a family relative who has been at the Korean Jamboree.
Lovely.
Paid $3,500 to go there, and the heat and the terrible sanitary conditions, they've all had to leave, and now there's some tropical storm arriving. So
oh no, okay.
I think everyone else is leaving. I don't think we're as bad as them, but I do wish I could sit in the garden and drink a beer and enjoy it, because it's not been like that, has it? Really, it's been wet as.
Not really. No, I think rain has just finished where I am. But
yeah. So,
yeah.
But it might be wet and rainy here, but somewhere else it's bright and shiny.
Oh yes.
And that is in Barbie Land, and we're going to be talking about two films today. Now, yes, you've guessed it, Barbie and Oppenheimer, or the Barbenheimer phenomenon, which we're going to talk about as well. We're going to be starting off with our general thoughts, as always, for both films, then giving everyone a spoiler warning, and moving into a bit more sort of the fine detail. We've both seen both, obviously. If you haven't seen either of them, I'd wait and then come back to the podcast. So before we do go into the details, Alex, what are your thoughts on, or what's your general first impressions on Barbenheimer? Which order did you see them in?
Oh, Oppenbeed. I think that's how you say it, which is doing
what?
Oppenheimer first.
Oppenbeed.
Yeah, Oppenheimer first, and then Barbie afterwards.
Oppenbeed sounds weird.
It does. I don't know if I got it right,
Yeah.
but it's a weird name. I think even Barbenheimer is really not right either. But
yeah,
we're gonna go.
Phonetically, it matches Oppenheimer, doesn't it? I suppose
It does.
Yeah, okay.
What about you? Which order did you do in?
I watched it in the Barbenheimer order, so I watched Barbie first, then Oppenheimer. But I had about a week between them. Rather, you didn't do them back to back, did you?
Not back to back, but I did Oppenheimer on Saturday, and then Sunday I did Barbie because I needed something to lighten my mood.
Okay, I think that is still back to back. You know, overnight
close.
Cogitation.
It was close.
Yeah. I meant to go and see Oppenheimer, but I forgot, and that's terrible. So I had to rebook it because I'm getting old. Okay, so we've both seen it in different. That's quite interesting to have it in different orders.
Yes.
You know, different arrangements. So, your thoughts on Oppenheimer first? Just general thoughts.
So
without
I didn't
spoilers.
really know what to expect. Well, that's not true. I knew what to expect because I saw the trailers. I knew that it was done by Christopher Nolan. I think I could see the stars and they've got a stellar cast. In fact, there's stellar cast in both of them. And because it was Christopher Nolan, I knew it would be good, but it wasn't a topic that I really wanted to delve into. So I went in a little bit sort of not skeptical, but just like I needed to be convinced. I needed to be won over. And I think that's a bit of a challenge when you're delving into something really dark like the development of the atom bomb. It's like you kind of I don't think it's like watching, and I kind of feel like it's almost like you need to have a reason to watch it. So for me, I was a little bit conflicted going into it.
Did you go and watch it because of the fuss that's been made about the?
So no, I went with a friend.
Phenomenon.
I went with a friend who was really excited about Oppenheimer and couldn't wait for it to be out. Whereas I was really excited about Barbie and couldn't wait for Barbie to be out. So I said, okay, I'll come and watch it. And then afterwards, I said to my wife, we need to see Barbie. I need something to offset that.
Yeah. Okay. So some people have said don't watch Oppenheimer first. Watch Barbie first, so you can enjoy Barbie. Don't be on too much of a downer after Oppenheimer. I watched Oppenheimer first. My degree is in the philosophy of science. I studied the lives and works of people relevant to Oppenheimer, although I was more on the side of the slightly earlier group of philosophers and scientists were people like Leibniz and Spinoza and Descartes. Although I did look at the Royal Institution and looked at people like Joseph Priestley, Newton, Karl Popper as well. So I have, for me, I look more at logic and early philosophy rather than metaphysics and physics. But I do find the lives of these people fascinating. I've always found the Manhattan Project a really interesting area to think about. And, obviously there's been films about that and books and comics. There's actually a series of comics called the Manhattan Project, which are really worth reading if you haven't read them.
Okay.
Are very, very well written and kind of blow your mind. So this area, I'm a scientist and I find the whole thing fascinating. But I don't think I didn't expect going in to have too much science. I'm assuming because it's Chris Nolan, it's going to be about the people rather than the science. Although I found, so I went in looking forward to the subject matter. I had actually Oppenheimer's not a man I've studied much. I didn't know anything about his life. So for me, I was looking forward to being educated as well about it and finding out. And I do like the Cold War era as well as a way. It was kind of half Cold War, half 1940s, 1950s, isn't it? But it was a timeline of events. Generally, did you enjoy Oppenheimer? What are your thoughts? Generally on the film,
it was a great film, and I think it was very well done. It really shone a light into his world and that at the time. So I think that was really, really good. I was conflicted in parts, and I think that kind of took the shine off it a bit. But I think it was a really good film. So I think it was well worth watching, but I have issues because of the subject matter rather than the filming.
We'll come to that. We'll come to that when we can be a bit more open about the storyline. And how about Barbie then? Barbie as your tonic to Oppenheimer.
It was lovely. It was. So you go to a film, you go to a Barbie film, you're not expecting to have deep, sort of soul-searching moments. You're not really looking for like questioning about whether about the patriarchy and its role in society. And so I went in with that like this is going to be light, and I was surprised at how deep and how much depth there was in the film. But what I liked about it was that I still left with a smile. And I think for me, that was the most important thing, is that while it covered some super interesting and relevant stuff, it had so much joy in it that you could just take out from that. So I think that was what made it for me.
I think it had a lot more depth than I expected as well. I mean, I expected going in for it to be a sort of a funny kind of parody on the subject matter with a bit of sort of a cartoonish feel to it. But actually, as you say, there was a message there. Yeah. There's a message that I think a certain proportion of society aren't going to enjoy very much. But as they say, people do find it quite hard to have a mirror held up in front of their face sometimes, and they find that disturbing. But I liked what they did with it. I thought it was very clever. I loved all the nods to the history of Barbie. My sister always used to play with Barbie, although I think she was much more of a... What was the other doll? It wasn't Barbie, it was...
Cindy?
Cindy. I think she's more of a Cindy fan. I think my mum was more of a preferred Cindy because Cindy's proportions were a little bit less extreme to play with. But I do remember her having a Barbie. So I historically, as part of our lives, it's a nostalgia fest. But I thought, as you say, I thought the casts were excellent, and I thought it was so wonderfully self-referential. And I think it's quite brave of Mattel to open up some of the problems associated with Barbie. There's always been a kind of a concern with body dysmorphia with Barbie and her proportions and expectations, and I think they did a really good job of that. And we'll probably dig a bit deeper about how we felt about Barbie. I would say, on reflection, Barbie's only an hour shorter than Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer's quite a long film, just over 3 hours, I think it is. Yeah. 3 hours and 1 minute, if you include the credits. But I would say of the two, and Barbie's just a little bit shorter than 2 hours, I would probably go and see Barbie again more than I'll go and see Oppenheimer again.
Yes.
Oppenheimer I really enjoyed. I left feeling outraged about how he was treated. I don't want to say too much more than that.
Yes.
But obviously it's a historical fact, so we know about that. I think Chris Nolan is very good at making beautiful films to look at.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. This is one of the more recent Nolan films where I could mostly hear what everyone was saying, which is always good, and that probably helped because there were less American accents in it, less mumbly accents. But I thought Cillian Murphy was excellent, and I think it's probably going to be an Oscar nomination for his role.
Yeah, it's got to be.
I had a few concerns as well. I mean, not big enough for me to go out with a billboard, but I will come to that in our spoiler talk. But yes, I think of the two, I think I enjoyed Barbie more. I think I respected what Chris Nolan has done. He's put together a good package there.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Totally.
Okay,
totally did.
Let's go into more detail. If you've not seen either of the films, but you've enjoyed our recommendations, go and see either of them and come back and listen. So let's do it in reverse then. So Oppenheimer first.
Okay.
So for people who have seen it, but want a reminder of the plot or the synopsis, it's a story about Oppenheimer's rise from early academia as a student, all the way up to him becoming the inventor, or as in the film calls him, the father of the atom bomb.
Mm.
And that's quite a big step from in terms of what's being told. There's quite a lot of time. It's a long film going to the cinema, but it's long in terms of the time actually it's represented in the story itself.
Yes.
I thought that was actually well dealt with. I don't think it was too onerous to in terms of how the story was spread out. Mm-hmm. So Oppenheimer, he starts working at the Cavendish laboratory. I think it was in Cambridge, and he's struggling because he's brighter than the students there and the teachers there. I think the opening sequence where he's trying to poison his professor by putting some cyanide or something in an apple, was fascinating because it struck me straight away as a storyteller. Chris Nolan's trying to portray a certain persona here. Oppenheimer, I think, what an extreme thing to do at that age. Like, he's obviously a guy with... what's Chris Nolan trying to say here straight away? That he's going to take risks for his own ends? I don't know. I mean, what are your thoughts on this? It was initially it really struck me as, would anyone actually do this? Was this actually a true event? I don't know.
It felt like he was, and I think he was trying to portray him as a, deeply troubled person in terms of his mental stability at that time, and maybe how he dealt with the situation of being at Cambridge.
Well, he has these dreams all the time, doesn't he? These dreams that are troubling him as well.
And so I think that's what they're trying to portray. And it does shock you. So you do kind of end up thinking, well, what's the rest of this 3-hour film going to be like? And then obviously, yes, he does go and go and retrieve the apple, and actually, I think in a way we kind of, we all kind of held our breath a bit when there was a moment
well, I think
there.
He realised that the apple's not going to be eaten by the professor, but given to his horse, and he has a sort of conscience of guilt that he's not out to kill the horse. So I don't know if he actually regretted what he was doing. I think he was more like, oh my god, I want to kill the wrong creature. I don't know how you felt about that.
Yeah, yeah. And I think
So yeah, so
I
he
was thinking that the scientist, like for a while, I was like, oh no, the scientist can't have it, and I was looking at it quite literally.
yeah.
And
Okay.
yeah, I think really that by the time he came back, it was clear that he'd changed his mind. So
Okay, so he visits Niels Bohr.
mhm.
I think that's in Germany, and he studies for a while there. I think he completes his PhD there, and whilst he's there, he meets Werner Heisenberg, who's obviously the father, the originator of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, which is all about being able to track and photograph or atoms electrons in an atom. Sorry, I'm getting geeky here now. In fact, before the podcast, I started looking through a few of the people in this film, and I fell down my sort of philosophy science rabbit hole.
Right.
But we'll come to that later on. Yeah, and he's impressed by Heisenberg, although Heisenberg is a little bit controversial later on in the film, because obviously this is back. This the first part of the film is in the 20s and 30s. We're moving towards the Second World War here, and the threat of sort of the Reich and all its technologies and the arms race. And the arms race is kind of essential to this film, isn't it? We know as children of the 80s what it feels like to live under the cloud, and I'll say the mushroom cloud of the nuclear bomb. We were around when Reagan was proposing his Star Wars policies, and we had various Russian presidents up until I forgot his name. Got the really nice one at the end that was friends with Gorbachev. That's it. Yeah. But the Cold War, we basically, the first and only bomb dropped was by the States, and that was obviously Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Yes.
Which is addressed in the film. There has been no nuclear bombs used in an act of war since then.
No.
And that's because every country has had their own brace of nuclear weapons as a way of unilaterally keeping the peace. And we have had nuclear disarmament since then. But this film kind of leads up to that whole process. And I think some of that is, I don't know how you felt about this, Alex, is I did feel like, we're going to see the bomb being built and they're going to test it. And for me, I was quite keen to see the kind of the behind the scenes of the bomb building, which was addressed in this, but it wasn't the main focus, was it?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't really the. Yes, there was. They all had this shared goal of delivering the bombs, but I think it wasn't about the bombs themselves. It was about the people and the journeys they went on to get there. And that ultimately that's what won me over, because while I did want to see the bombs development, that was the bit that troubled me a bit, with the outcome and stuff. So I think for me it was quite nice that it focused on people and their interactions, and obviously, I felt like that really helped build get you round to Oppenheimer's view and what he was trying to achieve.
The film is called Oppenheimer, and I do feel like, because it was central around him, the character himself, and it talked about his associations with the Communist Party in America, the US Communist Party, his womanizing. And as the film went on, you realise more and more, it doesn't show it, more and more how he was dipping his wick left, right and centre.
Oh, yeah.
And his relationship with Kitty, his wife, and with Florence Pugh's character, which she was called Jean, wasn't she? Jean Tatlock.
Oh, yeah.
His bit on the side, essentially. She was an interesting character. So, it kind of portrayed Oppenheimer as not entirely blameless in this. He was treated badly, I know, but it was interesting to show that he was not a squeaky clean character, and how he quite often was a bit of a loaded cannon, wasn't he? Really, he was quite dangerous for his associates, and he wasn't very good at politics, was he? Ironically,
no.
in that
He
respect.
also wasn't great at people to an extent.
No.
In terms of
No.
managing people, and so you did you felt for him in a lot of ways, because of the task, and the gravity and all of that. But he didn't endear himself to you just because of his sort of quite a few of his actions. So it did make it like troubled.
So, how did you feel about the structure of the film? Because it's presented in interesting ways, isn't it? It's presented in essentially flashbacks and flash forwards. You've got this. Is it a tribunal of some sort?
Yes.
It's not meant to be a tribunal. It's meant to be just a happy meeting. But obviously, it was a kangaroo court for poor old Oppenheimer.
That's right.
And that was, as we find out in the film, orchestrated by Straws, and it's his unusual surname, played by our favourite Iron Man, Robert Downey Jr., who I thought was really, really good in this, and actually his makeup was interesting because he looked a lot older and gaunter. He's obviously lost some weight for this film.
Yes.
Now I'm trying to remember the name of the character. I'm looking it up now. In Amadeus, which is an amazing film. Have you seen Amadeus?
I've not seen it.
You should watch it. So F. Murray Abraham, who's in the more recent series of
right,
that gaming series. What's the gaming series called on Apple TV? Epic. Oh God, I have to look that up as well now. Gosh, I'm getting down a rabbit hole. Excellent TV series about game development. Epic Quest, I think it's called something like that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it is.
Mythic Quest.
Quest.
So he's very good in that. He's a writer in that. But F. Murray Abraham plays Antonio Salieri in Amadeus, and this is obviously a real character. And Antonio Salieri was a struggling musician who had some talent but wasn't very successful, who constantly lived in the shadow of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, who was this young 16-year-old initially, it turned up, and was just a musical genius, and spent many. The film talks about sort of his jealousy of this guy's genius and skill, and I felt like Strauss was kind of the Oppenheimer version of Salieri. He was jealous of his success, jealous of his influence, and spent a lot of time trying to bring Oppenheimer down. And I kind of liked that part of the plot because it was very much a reveal, wasn't it? Over time.
He started off. It started off as a colleague, and then it slowly unveiled over the period of the film what was happening and why it was a big deal.
And it was presented a lot of it was presented in black and white.
Yes,
which is interesting. So you got the life of Oppenheimer in colour, and then the events. I felt a bit confused by this because it wasn't consistent, was it, at times either? I don't know what the black and white represented. It represented a certain amount of a certain meeting, didn't it? Basically.
So they were trying to what they were trying to do is they were trying to show that black and white was a retelling of the facts. So that was literally, what happened or the meetings that happened, and then the color was meant to be from Oppenheimer's perspective. So it was meant to be his view of things, somewhat colored by his mental state, and how he felt about things.
Sure.
But the thing is, like you said, it kind of bled into each other a bit because some of the views were it wasn't literal. It wasn't obvious enough that we were seeing a skewed version in color and a literal version in black and white. So and again, because they chopped and changed, it made it quite hard to work out sometimes. So that was an area that kind of was a little bit overused.
I think if you're more, you seem to understand more than me about that, but I think if you're more salient with the facts of Oppenheimer's life, maybe that was clearer. Maybe because I was new to this whole story, it was a bit more confusing. Interestingly, obviously, I didn't see this in IMAX, unfortunately. I'd like to see it in the IMAX format. But in the IMAX format, because there were black and white sections and they had to be in the IMAX, the ratio. Kodak had to develop the very, very first ever black and white film stock for IMAX for this.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
So that's a new. I presume that'll then be used for future films.
Clever.
Okay, so I was impressed with. I thought Matt Damon was very good in this, actually.
Yes.
And you can see obviously Matt Damon's an older actor now. He's getting different roles. I loved him as Dr. Mann in Interstellar. That's still my favourite Nolan film.
Yeah.
He was interesting in this. He was playing. Was it Graves or Groves? I think it's Graves. Leslie Graves.
Leslie Groves.
And he actually was on a break from acting when this was being filmed.
Right.
He had made this promise with his wife that he wouldn't do any more filming unless Chris Nolan asked him. And of course, when he did, his wife said, "Fine, go and act." So this was kind of a one-off for him recently. And it was filmed in parts over the pandemic, wasn't it? I mean, it was held back a little bit, I think. So Universal picked this story up with Chris Nolan after Chris Nolan fell out with Warner Brothers. And going back to the whole Barbenheimer phenomenon, it's quite an interesting thing. I find it quite interesting because I don't know if this is true. I don't know what your thoughts on this, but the fact that Warner Brothers put out, because I think Barbie is a Warner Brothers film, isn't it?
Yeah.
Licensed by Mattel, but it's a Warner Brothers film, and it's interesting how the slot that that kind of in a slightly less busy time of films being released. I mean, the summer blockbusters are the big ones, but we've had less films, I think, this summer than we've ever had. It's interesting how Barbie went up against Oppenheimer. And I think what was meant to happen was that Barbie was meant to foreshadow Chris Nolan. I wonder if Warner Brothers were having a bit of a dig at Chris Nolan about his past relationship with them. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. I just think it's really hilarious that what was meant to be kind of a plan to oust Oppenheimer has boosted Oppenheimer's figures, but also boosted Barbie's viewing figures and take. I mean, Barbie. How much has Barbie taken now?
So
is it hit $1 billion yet?
Yes. So it's already hit $1 billion worldwide, which is crazy. It's just coming up to $500 million in the US and Canada, which in itself is insane. And that's off a budget of 145 million. So now they spent 150 million in marketing, but even so, like, they are very happy with that response.
I bet they are.
Oppenheimer has actually done pretty well as well. So Oppenheimer has done 550 million.
So it's been $500 million as well.
Yeah, it's $500 million as well. The budget on that was actually a bit lower, so it was 100 million. So actually, probably in terms of profit, they've made more money on Barbie, but Oppenheimer's not done bad considering.
No, I mean, I've tried to get a booking at our local IMAX. I go to the BFI IMAX in London, and every single Oppenheimer performance is sold out for about 3 or 4 weeks.
Wow.
And I think part of that is that they did market that film as a cinema experience. It's not, it will do well and make money from streaming and download sales. But I think Chris Nolan's becoming the director known for, you've got to see it in a cinema first. Now I'm going to go and try and see the second part of June at the IMAX. Because I saw the first one on IMAX and with Bobby actually and loved it. So again, I like those sort of events now. I think it's really good now that people are being more convinced to go to the cinema, especially after the pandemic. When I went to Barbie, did you notice this? When I went to Barbie, it was predominantly women, but there were plenty of men there as well with their wives, with their girlfriends, but everybody was wearing pink. I felt like the one not in costume at a Rocky Horror performance. I didn't realise people getting dressed in pink to go to see it. Isn't that lovely? I think that's a really cool thing. That's become like a thing you do.
It was these events
where exactly, and that's what people are doing again, and I think that's really good because as much as we do have nice TVs and setups at home, it's what else they can offer at the cinemas. Sadly, my cinema showing of Barbie, about halfway through, I think they left halfway through. Some teenage boys left and then ran back in, shouting offensive swear words, which was a shame because there were young children, 12-year-old girls watching it. And I just think,
Yeah.
if you don't like a film, walk away. It's not your bag. Don't come in and ruin it for everyone else.
Yeah.
And there have been some upset men about Barbie. And we'll come to that later on. But let's just get back to Oppenheimer. I'm jumping around here because there were some things you had concerns with.
So
And what were your concerns with the film?
One of the main pieces. So yes, I feel like I'm getting middle-aged man syndrome
Right.
because there were a few things when I saw it in the cinema that bugged me. Just the sheer amount of bass and sort of the noise, the cacophony of noise that accompanied some of the Oppenheimer's sort of mental visions and things really grinded. I really struggled with that.
I mean, I don't know what your cinema was like, but for those sequences, all of our seats shook.
Yes.
Almost like we were in a 4D performance. Now, you didn't like that. I actually quite liked that. For me, it added to the experience, but you didn't like that as much. Was that because you couldn't hear what's going on the screen, or was it just for you it wasn't necessary?
I think it was just too much, and the problem was I just didn't feel like it was clear what was happening.
Right.
I felt like Christopher Nolan's focus on the experience went over the storytelling. So I felt like there was a story so there was a story that there, but yet he proceeded in showing lots of pictures of atoms and sparkles and colours and noise and I think I could have got that if it was where it felt like it was in context, but it was just so loud. The volume of it was so loud that it just kind of got a bit too much. So I didn't enjoy that piece of it, and that did hamper it a bit in terms of my enjoyment. Like later on in the film where it happens again, I was kind of like, I'm really not enjoying that. Like I've got your point. I see what you're trying to make. You could make that point in other ways, or you could maybe just turn it down a bit.
That's not the first time.
It's not the Nolan
people
way.
Have said that about Nolan films, haven't they? And a lot. I mean, I did actually as I walked out, and I had no problems with dialogue in this film, but as I walked out, I heard a couple of gents say, "Oh, I'll watch it again on DVD and with the subtitles on, so I know what they're saying."
I didn't find it hard to listen to.
No,
I didn't have like a Tenet moment where I was like, "Am I meant to understand this or not?" I genuinely didn't find any difficulty with listening to it. It was just some of the volume. I mean, the thing is, there was a case where towards the end of the film where there's like applause and he's done his thing.
Oh yes,
and then which
quiet,
was great. And it goes quiet, and there's like stamping and stuff. That was perfect, and that was in context, and it really had an impact. And I didn't feel like that was overwhelming at all. But I just kind of I just felt like some of them, particularly at the start of the film, it was like ramming its point home really, really, really loudly, and I was just like, well, okay, I've got it now.
Okay, so I had no problem with it. I quite enjoyed that, and I wonder if perhaps the differing cinemas had a different experience with that sound. I wonder if maybe it was. I mean, my cinema is an Odeon multiplex. I really wish I had an independent cinema near to where I live, but I don't. The Odeon that I'm in, excuse me, struggled over the pandemic. I think Odeon, I'm not sure it's for all their cinemas, but they invested quite a lot of money in our local cinema and made every cinema what used to be the premium seat. So all of our seats are mechanised recliners with tables. They upgraded the soundproofing, they upgraded the speakers. So it is for a non-IMAX theatre, it's a very good experience. And I wonder if perhaps the experience you got was just slightly different.
I saw it at the Curzon in the city.
Right, Mayfair.
And Liverpool Street.
City.
So
Okay,
it's
yeah.
near there. I can't remember
It's a pretty good
exactly,
cinema.
but yeah. And
Yeah,
it's a very good cinema, but it
yeah,
was a smaller cinema. It wasn't an IMAX, obviously.
sure.
But it was really nice, and yeah, so I do recommend the cinema. I don't think the cinema's at fault,
Yeah,
but I do think probably the Odeon cinema, because they've improved the audio level and stuff. You probably got a purer experience than
maybe.
perhaps we got.
So, anything else that you had problems with on the film?
Yeah, the only other piece, and this is a story problem rather than anything
Yeah,
else, is I felt like so we yes this was about the people, about the who were making the bomb. It wasn't
yeah,
necessarily about the bomb, but I just felt that like there was a bit of lip service to the um, impact and the victims of that bomb. So the thing is, he showed it visually in his flashbacks and stuff,
yeah.
but that wasn't,
The horror of the
it
horror of the weapon
didn't
you created. You mean?
exactly. It was really glossed over, and it really well, it wasn't glossed over, but it wasn't covered the way that I would have. And I
I
just didn't
agree.
feel as thoughtful as the rest of. There were some really clever pieces, and I just didn't feel that they'd covered it that in that, because it's such a big thing. It's like dropping two bombs, and you know Japan at the time, which was basically fanatical about how it was
Yeah,
proceeding with the war, changed over a couple of days, and there's that needed a little bit more attention, just so that it would have felt respectful, and I kind of felt like it could have done more there. Anyway, sorry, you go ahead.
yeah. No. I agree with you. I feel like he didn't wrestle with his guilt enough. I also appreciate there's a lot to cover in this film. It is Nolan's
Yes.
longest runtime of any of his films, but and they did address it a little bit. I mean, you can see that scene at the end with the clapping where he suddenly realizes, why am I being applauded? I'm a
That's right.
it's the famous quote, "I have become death, destroyer of worlds," which was from I forgot what the book's called. It was a book that Jackie opened up and found in his office when they were dating. Is it an Indian or a Hindu book, a Hindu religious
Oh,
book he was reading?
yeah, it's from sacred Hindu sacred text,
Yeah.
the Bhagavad
And
Gita.
so, okay, that's it. That's the one. Yeah. So, I mean, a very famous quote. You're right. I didn't feel like he was tortured enough about it. I mean, he was dealing with his shaky marriage with Kitty, obviously, because when she discovered in the hearing about
Yeah,
his philandering, he was dealing with the kind of the clash between the institutions of science and the military. And interestingly, if you
hmm.
go back and listen to the soundtrack has no drums in it whatsoever. So
Oh
you're talking
right.
about the noise in the cinema. That must be the noise of the bomb, but there were no drums in any of the soundtrack because
Right.
um, Nolan was very key. And it's old. Who's the other? It's Ludwig. Oh, it's the Scandinavian guy, isn't it? Who
Oh
made the
okay.
music? Ludwig Göransson, who I think did the soundtrack for Arrival as well.
Right.
Um, they didn't want to feature any drums, as they wanted it to be completely kind of non-military in its sound, because obviously drums are very military
Yeah.
sound,
Yeah.
and Oppenheimer was not a military guy.
Mm.
He was a scientist who was sort of dragged into the military and given a rank, which is reflected in that scene where he's wearing the jacket and they all take the piss out of him for wearing the jacket. He takes it off,
That's right.
the military
Yeah.
jacket. So yeah, I'm agree with you. I just feel like he wasn't. He didn't. There was less soul searching in the film about what he was potentially creating.
Yeah.
That was one of
I
my concerns. My other concern was how they dealt with Gene Tatlock. I just don't
yeah.
know why Florence Pugh needed to take her clothes off for those scenes.
Yeah. It wasn't necessary.
I
It
just
didn't
thought
add
that was a little
anything.
bit. That to me took. It kind of changed the tone of the film for me a little bit, which
Mm.
was more of a historical biopic, and I just didn't know why she had to take all her clothes off and flash them about a bit. I mean, is that to get bums on seats? I don't know. It was just really. It just felt
I don't.
tonally weird.
I don't think it was to get bums on seats. I guess
Was it to
they
show that
were
she was a bit
trying.
more salacious and a bit more free hand
Yeah,
with her
I
body?
guess.
And I don't know.
I guess what they were trying to do is to explain that Oppenheimer couldn't say no to her.
Right.
But you didn't have to do that visually. You could have
No.
done that, and it didn't. It really didn't add anything. I mean, I kind of he does mention like he's just like I can't say no to her, and it was like
Yeah.
the thing is the how flawed that is. Like it works without seeing her naked. It just
Yeah.
works because it's just like you end up just going, yeah, but come on, mate, you're married. It's like it's all
I
very
mean,
easy to say that,
Florence
but
Pugh is an attractive young lady. They could have done it much more elegantly, I thought, and actually, in some respects, not being able to see everything but being teased with seeing something is, in some respects, I would personally find that more cathartic as being Oppenheimer than it
yes,
all being out there being shown. Does that make sense? The forbidden
yeah, yeah.
fruit, almost.
Yeah. Well,
I mean,
also,
maybe
I
I'm
don't think it
thinking too
added
much.
anything. It wasn't
No, I don't
needed.
think it did. No.
You're talking about the 40s when it was like she probably would have worn a slip. It was like,
Yeah.
what's wrong with that? Well, I just didn't. Anyway, I think
Yeah.
that was the thing. I do agree with that.
No. So, I mean, on the whole, I mean, beautiful looking film, great sounding film, apart from although not the usual honking noise of the
No.
that you get in Inception. There's more of a sort of the basal sort of blah, 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 blah in the background. There we go.
Yes. I was impressed that there was no drums though. I didn't realise that
Yeah,
because you
you go
wouldn't
back and
tell.
listen to the soundtrack now. A lot of the
Clever.
percussive noises made by the violin, a lot of the string sections do the percussion sounds, which is really
Okay.
interesting. I thought Kelly Murphy was brilliant. I thought Emily Blunt was wonderfully understated, if that makes sense,
She
as a
was
sort of suffering
underused for
wife.
the role. Yeah.
It's a shame because she's a
But
great
I
actress.
get
Yeah.
why because it just didn't have time. But it was a shame.
Yeah. I was very impressed with Robert Downey Jr. and he did a very different role to normal. His as a sort of the Salieri role. It was pleasing to see Josh Hartnett in a different role.
Uh-huh.
The last thing I seen him in was Penny Black with Eva Green, which was a great series. Um, there were some interesting cameos. You had Kenneth Branagh, you had Tony Conti as Einstein. I thought were really good. Not sure what was going on with Rami Malek, but he was there as well. Although it was kind of a nice ending with a nice little twist at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a good cast. There's a Kenneth Branagh in there. There's Niels Bohr as well, with a
Yeah.
wonderful, actually really good German accent.
Yes, he's
His
very good at
accent,
that.
speaking English, was very authentic. I have German friends, and he just sounded very believable. So great
Yes.
cast. Okay, well, I still recommend watching this film, despite a couple of its flaws.
Oh,
It's a tricky one,
completely.
isn't it? A 3 hour film. I always find, like, especially if you're at home, where can you find the time to set 3 hours aside? I'm working my way through the John Wick films at the moment. I'm
Oh
on
right.
four next, and wondering when I can watch it. So again, another reason to watch it in the cinema and make it an event, I guess.
It also it
Yeah,
sets the time aside. Whereas if you're
yeah.
at home, often you
Double
kind of no,
screen,
let's
don't you?
wait for dinner, and then
Yeah,
you start, and then you get to a point where you're like, no, let's go and have a cup of
too
tea,
tired.
and
Yeah.
you just end up losing part of the evening, and yeah. So I definitely agree. Making it an event makes sense.
So Barbie. Where should we start with Barbie? Now,
Yes.
Barbie surprised me in a good way. We talked about that at the beginning of the podcast.
Hmm.
And I was, I think, the enjoyment of the film was, I think, discovering how they're going to portray her in her world. And you've probably read this as well, Alex. What I really enjoyed about the way the set design, the production was there was no CGI. And actually,
Hmm.
when my wife comes back from it tonight, I'm going to tell her that, and I think she's going to be surprised.
Yes.
And that
Very.
was a on purpose. They Greta Gerwig wanted she wanted to create something that was authentic because I think people
Hmm.
have got to the point now where they recognise CGI. CGI is easy. People can spot it now, and in some respects that takes it away from the film, especially as Barbie is a real thing you hold in your hand. So I was really interested in how they did that, and the fact that it was all painted backgrounds and mechanical effects, and the fact that the sets are designed so that Margot Robbie and all the other characters are about, what's the figure, 23% larger than everything actually is, to kind of mimic the weirdness and the kind of disproportionate size the actual doll was to her sets as
Yeah.
well. I thought that was a really lovely attention to detail and very clever. So Barbie, as men going to see the film, did you feel a little bit weird initially going in? Did you think this is not for me when you walked into the cinema, or were you, was that not a problem for you?
No, I didn't find that a problem at all.
No. Okay.
It's one of those things where I was just looking forward to some lightness, and
Oh right, yeah.
when I went to see Oppenheimer, one of the things that surprised me was how many people were dressed up for Barbie, and
In
so really
Oppenheimer.
dressed up. So
Oh,
not
sorry.
in
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Oppenheimer, because obviously there was
No.
Barbie shown at the same time. So there
Yeah, I
were so
see. Yeah,
many
right. Yeah.
people who were wearing pink. And I felt very underdressed in just t-shirt and stuff. I was just like,
Yeah.
oh no, feel awkward now. I didn't put any effort in. I should have worn 40s clothes. But that's not quite the same at 10 a.m. on a Sunday, which is when I saw
No.
Barbie. So that was just filled with normal people and that kind of thing. But yeah, so it just I honestly wasn't bothered by going to see a Barbie film as a man. I just didn't feel like that was an issue. I didn't feel like that was what it was going to be about. I wasn't prepared. And I was just looking for some light relief. And I got a lot more from that.
Well, interestingly, it's a film about existential crisis, mortality, self-doubt, and who'd have thought it going in to see a film about a doll for girls? Interesting.
Yeah.
You were saying about being self-conscious. My wife was much more disinclined to watch it because it was Barbie,
Oh, right.
and I think because she's got less
Really
of a tap
interesting.
on her finger on what's going on culturally in films. She's not that bothered about films really. She sees a lot less than me. That it didn't take. I mean, I could not convince her to go and see it until a very close friend of hers wanted to see it with her. So I'm hoping that she comes back pleasantly surprised like we were. So Barbie, the two central characters, Barbie and Ken, played by Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling. A wonderful pairing, actually. It's been great watching the interviews between them and how Margot Robbie
Yeah.
was so keen for Ryan Gosling to play the role.
Mm.
And Ryan Gosling's comedy is really good, I think. He's been very much kind of pushing the Kenergy philosophy in interviews and TV chat shows for quite a while. I did, as I left the cinema, look at trying to buy one of the I Am Knuff rainbow hoodies, beach
Great.
hoodies, but you can only buy them in America. You can't buy them in the UK, which is a bit annoying. I'm not sure how good I would look in a crop top jumper with my lack of a six pack. So probably an escape, from that. But he actually accepted the role. He saw his daughter's Ken doll lying face down in the mud, squished next to a squished lemon, and took a photograph of that doll and lemon, sent it to Greta Gerwig, and said, "I shall be your Ken. His story must be told." And I think that pretty much encapsulates Ryan Gosling's tongue-in-cheek sort of humour to this. Again, not just Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling, but a really, really cool, a really brilliant cast here. I thought America Ferrera was very good. She's brilliant in Ugly Betty and in the supermarket series she was in. What was it called? Is it Superstore? Have you seen that?
No, I've not.
Very worth watching. It's a comedy series, a bit like sort of 20-minute episodes with comedy humour.
Oh,
Reminds
okay.
me a bit of Community or Arrested Development,
Yes.
or The Office, but the American Office. So Superstore is worth watching. She's very good in that. So she's America Ferrera's been doing other things, but she's very good in this. But you've got Kate McKinnon as the weird Barbie. She's hilarious in this.
Yes.
Uh, Initially, the cast were actually trained to walk around. They were going to have these prosthetics in their hands, which were like spade hands to represent the doll's hands. So the cast were all training to kind of walk with that. They disbanded that idea eventually, but apparently Kate McKinnon was the best at doing the spade hands. And I think you see a little bit of that in the film, don't you, where she holds herself and her legs are split because she's been thrown around by the person that was playing with her. Will Ferrell was Will Ferrell in this, but that was nice enough. I thought that was quite funny. How did you feel about that bit, the kind of the executives and so on, all that kind of the world of Barbie Land and the human world? This story, this sort of extra-dimensional, multi-dimensional story.
So it was a little forced because and particularly the Mattel bit. I think that was, but once you got that it was kind of deliberately done that way, it kind of you just stopped trying to pick holes in it because there was no point. I do feel very much like Will Ferrell being Will Ferrell kind of set the tone for what Mattel could do, because it's like everything you couldn't get much depth from him because he's Will Ferrell. It's not his. Yeah, it's not his
with
forte.
The slightly kind of overt sort of tongue-in-cheek sexual tension between him and his team as well of other execs who are all trying to brown nose him.
Exactly.
That was quite funny. I mean, fair play to Mattel. I mean, they portrayed themselves as the bad guys in their own film. At least it wasn't, glorifying their company as such.
Yeah, they did, and then they made it work. I think, I mean, I think that kind of set the tone. So when I saw that he was in the film, I was like, all right, I don't have to worry. This is going to be fine.
Yeah.
But then obviously when you start getting onto the actual subject matter and stuff, then I'm like, oh wow, that's like way deeper than we were expecting.
I mean, so at times it was kind of a musical as well, wasn't it? It wasn't overly done, but that was quite funny as well. And visually, it was, it worked. The scenes as they were set up were almost a stage, weren't they? Because they were all practical effects. Yes. So having a song and dance now and then, which I haven't told my wife because she loves a musical, so she'll like it for that. But having a song and dance didn't feel out of place, I don't think. I was quite impressed. Well, I was quite taken aback by Helen Mirren being the narrator. Did you have that effect for you as well? So she narrates the story.
It was a bit weird, particularly when she comes in later on. Because
that was great. That was my favourite line of the film.
It was great, but it was also, I was also just like, hang on, you've distracted me now. But that was kind of the point. But no, I it's funny, but I kind of felt like having an authoritative figure as the narrator made sense, and she was just a safe pair of hands. And I felt like, it just felt very natural. So I didn't think too much about it. But it's because of that scene at the start, the 2001 scene. I think it kind of set the tone, and I felt like
we saw that in the trailers, didn't we?
Yes, that's right. It was in the trailers. So, but I do, you do kind of wonder, like, oh, why have they done this right at the start? Like, what's the thing? And then you're like, oh, there was no thing. This was just a nice gag that sets up the film. So let's just do that. But yeah, so I there's so little to fault. The acting. What I was really surprised about was the heart. That there was a lot of heart in this film. Around, where this came from, where did Barbie come from? What was the reasons for it? What was it like at that time? How did it impact girls and women in a positive way? And like the sort of naivety around some of that, just kind of that came across. And then when they had the cameo at the end. So that really, and you had Anne Roth as well. No, not Anne Roth. It was Anne Roth.
Yeah, well, Anne Roth was the old lady on the bench on the beach. She's a very famous fashion designer of her time.
But she was meant to be. She was playing the person who created Barbie. That was who she was meant to be.
Although she was a she.
Yeah, I think that was who she was meant to be playing on the
Because I
on the
know,
bench.
because I know that very famous actress Rhea Perlman
Hmm.
in the old lady in the room that when Barbie runs through that room at Mattel, and that's meant to
Right,
be
yeah.
Barbara Handler.
Oh, it was meant to be her. Was it meant to be her daughter? I can't quite remember. But
Possibly, yeah,
yeah, I'll have to look it up again. But it just really touched me about the fondness that had come out of that.
yeah,
And it's what was nice was how that was weaved into the story. So it wasn't placed. It didn't feel out of place. And because it became integral to, you know, why she was important for being her rather than anything else. I think that was really really powerful.
yeah.
So I
Because
love that. I love that moment.
because she says, Barbie came out of her own desires to be this perfect
Yes.
woman that she can never be. And I just find the whole central concept this fantasy world,
Mm.
but how it kind of, as you say, it holds up a magnifying glass to how women have been treated since the 50s up until now, and how there's a tide turning, the Me Too movement. But at the end of the film, rather than the women taking over again, there was a bit more. Because obviously in the Barbie world, all the Barbies have the main roles. They're the doctors, they're the prime minister, the presidents. They're the nurses.
Hmm.
They're all the main characters, all the main figures. Whereas the men are kind
Yeah,
of like sidekicks and don't come
that's
home
right.
to stay and so on. Ken gets upset when he realizes in the real world that the patriarchy is in power. He brings it back, and they have barbecues and like Ken dens and Ken lairs and so on. But at the end of the film, there's a appreciation from Barbie that it was too one sided when they were in power, and there was a lot more compromise. And I thought that was a really optimistic, forward thinking kind of approach, which I really liked.
So it was, however, there wasn't a case at the end where they said, like, come on, Ken, let's come and join us.
Yeah,
It took. It was one of those things. It's like, yay, we've won up back from the Kens, and
yeah,
I kind of felt like it would have been kinder to show a kind of more conciliatory tone. So there was that, but it was just mentioned. It wasn't really shown through the actions. And
yeah,
I always wondered, like, I just wondered, like, where did the Kens live? Like, where were they? And
yeah,
I was expecting at one moment to find this underground lair which is like in the sewers or something, which is where the Kens went at the end of the day because they didn't have a space in the Barbie houses. So I've kind of had this in my head, and I was just like, okay, clearly that's
yeah,
not how it worked, but I was like, you know, it would have, because I think one of the challenges is it's really easy to paint things as all one way or all another way. So
I
it's
was going to say
very
black and
easy
white,
to,
but actually it's
yeah,
more like black and
exactly.
pink, isn't it? Really?
And it just, I don't feel it's that case. I think things have moved a long way. Is there more, for them to further for them to go? Yeah, absolutely,
Oh
and I
yeah, yeah.
totally appreciate that. But I felt like that piece wasn't really mentioned. It was kind of
Could this
just
film
glossed over.
could this film have been made even 10 years ago? I mean, it was first. The idea first came around in 2009, so maybe 10 years ago. But
Mm.
let's just say turn of the century, 2000s. This film probably couldn't be made, could it? It just wouldn't have been. It wouldn't have been optioned by the Hollywood producers at the time. I don't think.
Possibly. I just, yeah, I mean, you're possibly right. But I think it's one of those things that maybe the fact that this has been made shows that things have moved on a lot
Yeah,
further than they could. And obviously the whole point around Ken bringing the patriarchy back to Barbie Land is like to show the extreme, not to show reality. It's
yeah,
meant to be extreme.
It's
I
an
have to say though,
allegory,
I
isn't it?
love,
Really.
yeah, completely. I
Yeah.
loved Mojo Dojo Casa House.
That's what I was trying to say earlier on. Ken's dead. What an idiot.
That's
Say it
it.
again.
Ken said
Say it again.
Mojo Dojo Casa House, which obviously means house, 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 house.
Yes, exactly. Showing
But
Ken's
I
general
just thought,
intelligence, but yeah.
yeah, exactly. I thought it was hilarious. I and it he was such his particular character was
It's
so much
brilliant.
fun. You know, you couldn't take what he was doing seriously, and I think that was the best part about this. And ultimately, he has to go on a journey like Barbie does. Um, but this isn't his film, if that makes sense.
No.
So it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay that he doesn't. All of this isn't reconciled. It's fine. It's just. But I just he was so funny to watch, and the dance off. Oh my god, the dance off.
Yeah.
That was
It's very
hilarious.
good. Yeah.
So
And I think
yeah. So I think. Go on.
when Simu Liu came in, who got he was Shang-Chi, wasn't he?
Yes.
When he
Yes,
came in
that's
and they
right.
were doing a lot of the auditioning and working out, because he's so acrobatic, he was doing lots of backflips and things for this sort of dance-off when they were sort of practicing it. And Greta Gerwig noticed this, that Ryan Gosling's reaction to sort of Simu Liu's like genius dancing. Kind of, he was a little bit like, he was jokey jealous and a jokey, and that's where she developed in the storyline the rivalry between. I think he's meant to be. Is he Asian Ken? I can't remember. There's a whole. I
He
have to look at the list.
he is tourist Ken,
Tourist Ken. That's right. He's Tourist Ken. Uh, Tourist Ken.
and obviously Ryan Gosling's beach Ken.
Beach Ken. Because what do you do? I
I
do
beach.
beach. I beach.
Beach.
I beach. So that rivalry storyline came up because of a jokey rivalry during dance-off rehearsals, and I love that whole idea. Let's go through some of the Kens. I think that'd be quite good, funny. I mean, I was looking at the cast list and some of the Kens' names. When you've got the different Barbies, you've got President Barbie, Writer Barbie, Physicist Barbie, Doctor Barbie, and then Kens. You've got Tourist Ken, which is Simu Liu. You've got Basketball Ken, that's Kingsley Ben-Adir, who was in Secret Invasion recently as well. You've got Artist Ken, played by Nakuti Gatwa. You've got, I think that's all the Kens there. Then you've got a few more
We've
Barbies.
got more.
But we've got more Barbies, more Kens. But the Kens
Yeah.
that were kind of the ones that were discontinued were quite funny, weren't they, as well?
Oh yeah.
So there were a few Kens in Weird Barbie's house. I mean, you've got Merman Ken in the sea with Dua Lipa, who was played by John Cena. That was a nice little cameo. I thought it was hilarious.
It just cracked me up.
Yeah, I'm
John
trying to
Rob
find.
Brydon was Sugar
Yeah.
Daddy Ken.
Sugar Daddy Ken.
That's literally the name. We had Tom Staunton, who's an English actor.
He's the
Earring
earring.
Magic Ken. Yeah.
Yeah, that was
Or Gay
discontinued
Ken.
because it was picked up. Earring Ken was picked up by the LGBT plus Q plus kind of following, and became a big popular doll amongst a lot of the queer movement. And I don't think Mattel liked that very much. So they just discontinued it.
Yes.
Which is sad, really, isn't it? And again, a sign of the times at the time. And then you've got Michael Cera's character, Alan, who
Right.
I see. I don't know
yes.
much about.
Oh, he was Alan, Yes.
He was a real Ken. Well, Ken, a model too. He was actually Midge's husband in the toy line.
That's
So
right.
Midge. So and again with Midge, who played pregnant Barbie, she had problems on sale in that when the box art was made, there was no sign of Alan, who'd married her in law, and so there were outcries about teenage pregnancy and single mum pregnancy. So they had to remake the box with Alan in the background, and the silver wedding ring on her finger had to be painted thicker, so it was more obvious. And just what a funny, silly, prudy world we live in that people thought that, But I thought he was brilliant, and I love that kind of parallel with his film. So at the end of the film, he helps Barbie escape, or he helps Barbie and her owners get back into Barbie Land, doesn't he?
That's right.
He has to confront all the Kens on the road as they're building the road signs and things for the Keniverse.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that he kind of suddenly became like this kung fu expert and could take them all out, which it feels kind of like a parallel with that kind of film based on the comic. I'm trying to remember what the film, the Edgar Wright film. What was it called? It's going to bug me until I find out now. I'll look it up. And I thought that again the plot line of him, he was a weird character, wasn't he? Really, as such.
Yeah.
Scott Pilgrim versus the World. That was it.
I
Because in
see,
Scott
yes.
Pilgrim, near the end of that boss battle, and he's suddenly really good. And I thought the storyline felt very similar for him, for that character. I wonder if he was cast because of that. I don't know. Who knows?
The thing is, I wondered whether some of this would be more like the Lego Movie, in that there were people who were performing the things. So when they were fighting, it was someone was doing play fighting, so it didn't matter. If
Oh,
that
I
makes
see.
sense.
Yeah. That makes
So
sense.
I thought that was going to be a little bit. There was going to be a little bit of that.
Oh, you
Really
mean the more
happen.
like the humans in the background? You mean?
Yeah.
Like
I kind of
like a
expected.
parallel.
Or like when you're if you're playing with a Barbie, and then it's like, oh, you're going to do a flying kick, and you just like swing the leg all the like 90 degrees. And
Yeah.
it's like, hey, I was expecting things like that to be
Well,
happening.
they hinted at that, didn't they, with Barbie floating down between floors because there were never stairs made for the Barbie
That's right.
dream
Yeah,
house, so the kids
it
would
was
just
hinted,
move it
but it
downstairs.
never really went as far as Lego Movie did,
Yeah,
where it
wow.
was actually people doing it.
I wonder if scenes like that got cut from the film, perhaps for length. I don't know.
Possibly.
Yeah.
There were, what I loved. So there was a few things that you just like. What was funny is that it was willing to laugh at itself at
Yeah.
some of its things, and so you had things like growing up Skipper, whose boobs literally grew.
Yeah.
And I
Oh,
just
yes.
found, the thing is, you think to yourself, oh, that's a joke, right? And you're like, no, that's actually true.
That
That's
actually happened.
exactly what happened.
I remember that. I
And
remember a doll where you pump up its boobs. Was it that? It
yeah,
must have been that doll.
um,
Goodness
possibly,
me.
I'm not sure. But yeah, we're talking about the same doll.
Possibly. Oh,
um,
yeah.
but the
Oh,
thing
hold
is,
on.
I was
Hold on. What was that? Bobby's not here. We can't make those sort of jokes.
no, that's very true. Um, but yeah, but the thing is, what was really nice is that it was aware of these things, and
Yeah.
it celebrated them, even though that it could see the flaws in them. And it was little things like, at the end you saw the real boxes and like real designs for some of
Yeah.
the old Barbies. And so it really showed like there was a lot of love for what the past of Barbie,
Yeah.
even though bits of it were flawed and didn't, weren't perfect. Obviously, it's just a toy, at the end of the day. But it just kind of, what was nice was it was kind of, it gave nods to those things, and it didn't hide them. It didn't whitewash them or anything. It didn't do anything.
No.
It was like, no, this was what we tried, and then we got rid of it.
And I thought the ending where Barbie went and lived with the humans was a lovely kind of ending to the film. And the fact that
Yeah.
Gloria and her husband, who is the actor who plays her husband, is her real life husband in real life anyway, which is quite nice. They took her. The last scene was her taking her to a gynecologist, which I thought was hilarious.
Yeah.
Like that's just like the real world scenario there from Barbie. Like Barbie would not know anything about that because they talk about them not having genitals at the beginning of the film, don't they?
No, that's
They
true.
have a bump.
Yeah.
And so that was quite interesting that she's obviously changing as well. I thought that was just a really interesting little sort of nod at the end. No, I think of the two films, I enjoyed both. I think I came out more satisfied about what I'd seen from Barbie, which is really interesting, isn't it?
Yes, agreed. I completely agree. I was surprised at his depth.
Yeah.
And I didn't at the end of it I was thinking, do I have to have a justice for Ken moment where I'm like, Ken deserves a role too, and I was like, nah, he's fine, he can deal with it, it's okay. Like it didn't feel
know,
like he was robbed.
There are people there are a lot of men who do not like this film. A lot of them are outraged about it who haven't even seen it, which is standard. I think I said this before. If you're offended by this film, I think you need to, like I say, take a look at yourself more than anything else, because if you can't see what's going on in the world around you, and even a film about a plastic doll that highlights this, you can't understand that, then I think you really need to take a long, hard look at yourself, because it's such a beautiful, friendly, joyful, as you say, film that's honest about what's going on. And that monologue that America Ferrera does about how women have been treated in history, that for me was the kind of the apex moment of the film, because it was so so true and so to the core of what's going on. And I thought, well done for a film about toy dolls that can bring this out that other films can't.
It was really powerful. It was great. It was a great line. I think one of the things that you have to look at is you have to look at the director, and then you have to say, okay, well, what have they done? And then when you look at Greta Gerwig's roles, her films that she's done, I think
she's done Lady Bird.
You kind of she did Lady Bird, and
White
it's
Noise.
like once you have a look at that and you see the content and the fact that it is talking about some of this stuff, I think it puts it into more of a perspective.
Yeah.
And I think it's amazing, because the next one she's going to be doing is Snow White. So God knows what that's going to be like. But wow. I think the reality is it will probably be exactly as Disney tell her to be.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
But I do think that, like, following on from Lady Bird and Little Women, for example, it's like, yeah, of course it's going to be celebrating women. That's what you expect when you get Greta Gerwig in to do your film. And it's also what you really expect of a Barbie film to an extent, because why wouldn't you? So the kind of, oh no, I feel persecuted as a man bit. I'm like, actually, it's okay to feel a bit awkward about it at points, because
so you should.
It just highlights. Yeah, it just highlights that actually there's some elements that are unequal in society, and we should think about that. But it's not a personal attack. It's not like you are the fault of this. It just gets you thinking about that, and that's not what I expected from a Barbie movie.
And that's what makes the film art.
Yes,
it's a work of art because of that, because it makes you think.
Yeah, it really did. It ticked the box. It ticked the box of it's not just a film about Barbie, which is a really high bar, really. If you think about the content, you could have she could have had very little to work with.
This is a good point to stop here, I think. But I would like to say I very much hope they do not make a sequel. I think that the film in itself, as it is so perfect and rounded off that I don't think they need to make a sequel. But looking at how much money it's made, who knows? But maybe Greta Gerwig will be brought in for other projects if she's this sort of bankable. But I really hope they don't make a sequel. Okay, let's do the usual housekeeping. So you can find Alex on Mastodon at alexhansford@twit.social. You can find me at John PR Evans at mstdn.social. If you want to listen to the podcast in your web browser, we're at playpausturn.show. It's always a pleasure talking to you, Alex. Thank you so much for joining me again on the podcast.
Thank you, John.
I am swanning off for a couple of weeks on holiday, but we'll see what happens over the next few weeks. This has been Play Pause Turn, and thank you for listening.